off the Friday Forum series every year with somebody who's going to inform and inspire you, and that's Julie. Anyone who knows me knows that I love a great speaker who's also a parent, because I always learn the most, I think, from fellow parents who are facing similar challenges and who are doing incredible things to help not only their own child, but other children. That is our mission at CTC, and it is Julie's as well. Julie Tracy founded Urban Autism Solutions, the Julie and Michael Tracy Foundation, in 2012 with her husband, Michael, after recognizing a need to provide young adults with autism residential, social, and vocational solutions. She's the executive director of Urban Autism Solutions, is a qualified intellectual disabilities professional, and a licensed SILA provider. A speech and language pathologist for more than 33 years, Julie is the owner of Pediatric Speech, Language, and Literacy Services, a boutique pediatric evaluation and therapy business which has been serving the needs of children with complex language and learning difficulties for more than 13 years. She has also provided speech and language evaluation and treatment at Evanston and Glenbrook Hospitals, Northwestern Memorial Hospital, Chicago Institute for Neurosurgery and Neural Research, and the Cove School. She has lectured and served as a clinical supervisor for the Northwestern University Voice, Speech, and Language Service, and has authored several articles related to communication disorders. Julie currently provides supervision for graduate students in the Rush Speech Language Pathology program. Julie has also served in a wide variety of philanthropic capacities and on many community boards. Programs created have served hundreds of children with and without special needs in the areas of recreation, education, religious education, and agricultural engagement. I have to learn more about that one. We are thrilled that she is here today, so please help me welcome Julie Tracy.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Linda, for that lovely introduction. Let me start by saying how impressed I am with everything that Linda is doing here with your group. It's so important, as she mentioned, that you have taken advantage of every opportunity that you can to learn as much as you can. I know even hearing that makes you feel tired. We're all tired as parents, but it's a really wonderful opportunity. I'm also very glad to hear that Stephen Joseph and Juana Ponte are coming to talk with you. They are amazing individuals, and I personally worked with Stephen Joseph when we were creating our model, so I can't speak highly enough about him. You should also know that the Department of Human Services is changing the way it's organizing its independent service coordinators. So you are no longer going to be bound by a geographic area. If you want to find a different service coordinator or use someone for now self-assistance with your programming, you're going to have more choices in that area. All those changes are coming down the road very quickly. They're actually being implemented now. So those are good things for consumers. So as Linda said, she's asked me to come here today to talk to you and tell you a little bit about who we are and what we've done and how we've accomplished it. She's also asked me to try and inspire and encourage you, and I will certainly do my best to do that. I hope that you can see your situation after listening to me today in a bigger picture light. We're going to talk a lot about autism. That's what I know best in terms of the developmental disabilities world. But I want you to see yourselves as part of something bigger that's happening in the country, that's happening to hundreds of thousands of people. To know that you're a statistic that is being tracked at this moment as more and more attention is being given to young adults with developmental disabilities. As Linda mentioned, I am a professional. I'm a speech and language pathologist. Most people don't know that I'm also a licensed herdsman. I have taken care of thousands of dairy cows and horses in my life as well. And I think my background in large animal management is probably comes in the handiest every day. And I'm not kidding. I think that's what I pull from the most when I'm dealing with young people who are struggling and parents who are struggling. There's a lot to be learned there. So it ties in, somehow it all ties into this crazy story and where we are today. I'm going to share with you my son John's story. It's a very painful story. It's very hard to listen to. I want you to know that I share it with John's permission. And I'll skip to the end so that you know that John is in a much better place now. But we certainly had our struggles, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about those. So you should know that we are parents to two now grown children, Joe and John. Joe is 27 years old now and he lives in California. He works for the Jimmy Kimmel Show. John is 25. John was diagnosed with autism when he was 2 years old. I love this picture because Joe is literally holding his brother John up. There's a lot of foreshadowing in this picture. Little did we know how important this relationship would be to both brothers, and how it continues to evolve, and how much love any of us have for all of our children, and how we manage to get through these years. I don't really know, it's kind of a blur, because I look at that picture and I can barely remember those years at all. I don't know if any of you have those experiences as well, but when John was 2, he did have a diagnosis of pervasive developmental disorder back in the days, believe it or not, when people really weren't talking about autism. It wasn't easy. His diagnosis was challenging because John was really a puzzle. He was smart, he was funny, he was very articulate, and he was very socially driven. He had these unique juxtapositions of verbal abilities alongside a brain that really didn't process visual space, motor planning, emotional regulation. Those two pieces lived inside of his brain in a very, very frustrating and puzzling manner. The same boy who could write beautiful poetry and express his thoughts eloquently could not, at the age of 6, balance Cheerios and milk on a spoon together because he was so apraxic. Nor could he play with his toys as much as he wanted to. So, I will tell you that a lifetime, the stage was set, really, for a lifetime of social isolation and frustration for John. And as parents, and I think especially as mothers of children like these, we develop a very unique antenna. We subconsciously spend our days scanning the environment for every little thing, every landmine, every potential glitch that is going to create an explosion. I can tell you that it was so hard to manage John's moods. There always seemed to be two Johns. One was generous, funny, engaging. The other was frustrated, irritable, and inconsolable. As a professional, I thought I was losing my mind half the time. I would go to bed some nights and think, my son is profoundly mentally disabled. And I would go to bed other nights and think, my son is a genius. And I couldn't figure out which it was. And nobody else could either. But these are beautiful pictures. Most of our days didn't look like this, as you all know. I think it's interesting that in most pictures, when I look back now, John is always looking off to the side. I see a lot of young kids with autism. I see a lot of Christmas cards like that. I think it's really very telling. Maybe we don't need all the fancy diagnostic tools. Maybe we just need a Christmas card picture. I don't know. But anyway, in the early years, I was certain that if I just found the right combination of supports, of teachers, of peers, even the paper on which John would write, that I could manage to create a smooth day for him. I can't really say that that ever happened. We had some wonderful times, don't get me wrong. But I see now that it was almost impossible to predict what would set John off. We started every school year with the highest hopes, but the emotional struggles usually got the best of us by November. I can tell you from the moment that he was born now, I felt as though there was a part of me that was uniquely connected just to him. So mindful and tuned in was I to every tear, every disappointment, and every storm. Nobody understood John the way that I did. I so desperately wanted the world to make room for his eccentricities and all the things that were special about him. But I'm here to tell you that we do not live in that world, ladies and gentlemen. That's not going to happen for the most part for most of our children. Our children are going to learn to live in the world around them, and that is the truth. John entered high school, and he had the highest hopes. He tried his hand at a lot of different activities, and somewhere during those years, the darkness descended. It was subtle at first. His frustration and rage came in bursts. He withdrew from everything and everybody. He became very aggressive and dangerous. It was not a question of if, but when he was going to kill me. I used to worry at night who would take care of him. Not that I was going to die or get hurt, but who would take care of John when he killed me? His father and his brother surely would want nothing to do with him if he succeeded. Thus became an odyssey of many, many different psychiatric hospitalizations that we went through. Most of them were very profoundly disturbing and useless. Many times, John was taken away to places and we didn't even know where he was going. He was 18 years old. I wasn't his legal guardian at that time, and he would literally disappear into the night, and I couldn't even find out where he had been taken. There was one time where we showed up on a hospital on the south side of Chicago, and I was hoping that he was possibly there, and I literally showed up with brownies, like I was going to some Girl Scout meeting, and I thought maybe if I bring them a treat, they'll let me in. Unfortunately, that didn't work either. And I can tell you, those days, they went on for quite a while. There was one time when John was taken by ambulance to a hospital in Milwaukee, and I followed him in the middle of the night. It was probably the 5th night that I hadn't slept at all, and I drove my car off the road at 60 miles an hour on the freeway. I didn't look so good by the time I got to that hospital, and when I walked in carrying his suitcase, I walked up to the front desk, and I remember the woman looked at me quizzically, and she said, "What's your name?" And I said, "Tracy." And she kind of looked at her paperwork, and she said, "All right, well, come this way." So she brought me back and put me in a room, and I didn't know what was happening. And the next thing I knew, she had a blood pressure monitor on my arm. And I said, "You know, I'm just here to drop off some clothes for my son." And she said, "Oh, thank God, we were expecting a male admission, but when you walked in the door, I wasn't so sure." So, I mean, it's pretty rough going, and I think I could have just as easily had a room in that facility as John did. Anyway, during those days, Mike and I finally unilaterally placed John at the orthogenic school. How many of you are familiar with the orthogenic school? Anybody ever heard of it? The orthogenic school is a wonderful, old, therapeutic residential treatment program in Hyde Park. It's possibly one of the best residential schools in the country that nobody has ever heard of. John was amazingly successful when he first arrived there. The yellow door is the symbol of the orthogenic school, and he had a wonderful honeymoon for 4 or 5 months, and then of course he began a very precipitous decline, and things got even worse. During the summer of 2011, John was admitted to Rush University Medical Center, where he was hospitalized for over 6 weeks. In the middle of that hospital stay, he ended up in the intensive care unit near death. And I can tell you, if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't believe it. He was literally dying from being mentally ill, and nobody knew what to do for him. So at that moment in those days, our suffering, I can tell you, was so transformative. We literally ended one life as we knew it, and we picked up a new one, because we looked around and we thought, you know, if we're going through this, other people are struggling like we are, and where are the resources, and where is some sort of a navigation system to tell parents, at least, you'll get through this, or I've been through this, or it's not your son's autism, he's mentally ill and it's getting worse. Nobody could figure it out. So Mike and I decided that we were going to start our own organization to try to address some of these struggles. Now, John did make it through this hospitalization, and the whole time he was there, imagine being hospitalized for 6 weeks and you never get to go outside. I don't know how anybody can get better in a psychiatric hospital. It's a terrible, terrible conundrum. The places themselves, they do the best that they can, but they literally drive you crazy. So he begged and begged, "Please, can I come home? Take me home. Can I come home?" But of course, we couldn't take him home. What we could do, when he finally did get out, we walked him to the lakefront in Hyde Park. And I'll never forget this moment. It was a moment of great hope. John could barely walk. He was very cognitively altered from that hospitalization and the ravages of the psychosis that he had been through. But we made it that far, and I knew then that Mike and I were going to have to figure this out. We were going to have to figure out all those initials and all those systems, and none of it felt good. It was overwhelming and terrifying, but we knew we were going to have to do it. So as Linda said, we founded our organization in 2012, now known as Urban Autism Solutions. Urban Autism Solutions is dedicated to helping young people with autism find integrated lives with social and vocational opportunities. We are city people. I am a city girl from Milwaukee. I'm a big booster of the city of Chicago. I love the city of Chicago. I think there's never been a better time to live in Chicago. Chicago gets a terrible rap. Our lived experience of the city is just, it's a miraculous, wonderful place with friendly people who are very helpful and very committed, and there's just endless opportunities. So we are a city-based organization. We're very happy to be there. I'm going to step back a little bit now and talk in a broader sense about what's happening in the country. We won't spend too much time on the facts and figures, but I do want you to think about this a little bit. So we know that autism is a lifelong neurodevelopmental disorder, right? And that the effects on language and communication and relationships and social cognition do not necessarily go away. And I think this is something that really hit me when I sat at the lakefront that day with John. I was really rooting on him, maybe in his younger years, kind of outgrowing some of this. And he certainly has changed. But for the most part, no matter what you hear, people with autism do not outgrow their autism. And they spend a heck of a lot more time in the adult years than they do in their school years, in the years before they're 22 years old. So, the other thing facing us that we all know is that none of our kids are the same. They have a wide variety of abilities and challenges. They have different interests. They look completely different from each other. And as a result, the supports and services that they're going to need are going to be very different. They're going to differ widely among just a classroom, let alone an entire country. So we have to ask ourselves the question how we as a society are going to manage the psychiatrically fragile group of transition-age kids in their early 20s and beyond, because there is an epidemic of them coming and they're already here. One of my favorite researchers that you'll hear me talk about a lot is Dr. Paul Shattuck. Paul is somebody that you should know about. He's a wonderful, personable speaker. He runs the AJ Drexel Life Course Outcomes Program in Pennsylvania. And I think they've just been given a very large gift for their program, upwards of $5 million. So it's a wonderful thing. And the thing that they're doing is that they're studying the impact of autism on people living with autism today. So they're looking at services and supports and outcomes for people living with autism. They're not looking at cures, they're not looking at early intervention, they're not looking at those kinds of things. They're looking at what is working for young people today. That's the kind of information that we all need in order to build effective programs. So, as you probably know, the statistics aren't changing too much. The estimates are still about 1 in 68 kids with a diagnosis of autism. We estimate that 50,000 kids a year are transitioning out of public school systems, and in the next decade there will be 500,000 young Americans with autism entering the general population. I think that's holding pretty steady. Paul has authored 3 reports. They're called the National Autism Indicator Reports, and they go from 2015 to 2017. And I'm not going to go deep diving into these statistics, but you should take a look at them because they're free and they're really very easy to read and parse through, and they are really helpful in informing a lot of our thinking. My favorite one is the first one that he put out in 2015 because this was the shot heard around the world. The National Institute of Health really got wind of Paul's work, and some of the information I'm going to report to you was so alarming that I personally feel since 2015 we're already making progress, and some of these things are changing. I think things are actually getting a little bit better. But Paul does report on a number of areas like services, disconnection, living arrangements, health and mental health and wellness, post-secondary education, and so these are some of the things that he's finding. When we start with disconnection, well, let's start with services. So half of students in the United States have transition plans. When they leave high school, only half of them are getting any access to to mental health services, case management services, and speech and language therapy. And most of these kids in high school are still getting those services, and they very much need them to continue to be successful as young adults, but they're not getting them. In terms of, oh, and also if you're from a low-income household or you're a person of color, forget that. You get nothing, and I mean nothing. So that's the whole city of Chicago, by the way. In terms of disconnection, Paul talks about disconnection as meaning you are not in a post-secondary educational program or you're not working. So that's the disconnection group as he defines them. He found that over a third of young adults were completely disconnected in their early 20s. Much higher than students with learning disabilities, speech and language disabilities, and emotional impairment. Those kids are disconnected at a rate of about 8%. So we're doing much worse. In terms of health and mental health, easily 60% of kids with an autism spectrum diagnosis have a comorbid health problem, certainly a mental health problem. 75% are taking medication. It looks like about a third of our kids are making it to post-secondary schools. For the most part, they're 2-year programs that they're entering. We're seeing these programs popping up everywhere now. I'd like to talk a little bit about that later. I think you're having some speakers come from some of these programs. I have a lot of thoughts about those as well. When it comes to employment, we've got about a 60% rate of adults on the spectrum working for pay outside of their home between high school and their early 20s. It's a far lower rate than other individuals with other types of disabilities. Those who are getting jobs are working in pretty low-paying jobs, and most of them are part-time. But importantly, 90% of kids who work during high school are working in their early 20s. So having paid employment on your transcript is very important as you're leaving high school programs. It seems to really predict post-transition success. It's one of the predictors. In terms of social and community participation, this one really got me. He reports really 1 in 4 young adults report being socially isolated, and by that we mean they never see a friend, they never are invited anywhere. When we first looked at this data, those numbers were much higher. But I think as a parent, that's what was most important to me. We knew that when we created programming, we really wanted to build in a strong social network component for our kids. They're not very good at doing this for themselves. The second study, so that was the first one, and like I said, those numbers really caught the attention of some people who needed to see them. The second report came out in 2016, and it really just looks at vocational outcomes and the vocational rehab system in the country. We're not going to go too deep into this because, again, I know you're going to have other speakers talking about this. But you should know the voc rehab department is housed in the U.S. Department of Education's Rehabilitation Services Administration. So it's not necessarily the Department of Labor. We know that most individuals with autism have some difficulty finding and keeping a job, even those kids who have higher cognitive skills. They're going to need some help with employment. Voc Rehab is the largest funder in the country for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities who have trouble obtaining, maintaining, or retaining employment. You will hear those 3 words quite a bit. I know Linda's very interested in employment. So the Voc Rehab in Illinois is the Department of Rehab Services that you will be working with. Voc Rehab is also the largest funder of employment services in the United States for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. 2 recent endorsements that are very important are the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, or the WIOA program, and the Employment First Initiative. The WIOA program basically started the emphasis on creating individual plans for employment for individuals. So it really called attention to the need for customized employment and individual plans for kids. Employment First is absolutely being adopted as the law of the land. It's a wonderful program because it presumes competence. And it tells people there's no more a lot of time here for training programs. We're putting people in jobs first. I know a lot of parents have mixed feelings about this. Their kids have been in more shelter-type workshops and those kind of programs. And I agree that I think there's a lot of benefit to those programs. So while we make gains, we also have some, not everybody is going to work in a full-time job at a competitive wage. I think that's just the truth. So we're a little caught in the middle here, but basically, just so you know, a few facts and figures. People with autism are leaving the voc rehab system with employment at about the same rate that other people with intellectual and developmental disabilities are leaving. They're using supported employment less. More of our guys are working in office jobs than food service or cleaning jobs. Most of these jobs, again, don't pay very well and they're part-time. I think the median wage is about $160 a week. And interestingly, it's more expensive for states to help people with autism than other intellectual and developmental disabilities. Right now, it's about 20% higher, the voc rehab cost per case for an individual with autism. We don't know why, but that is something out there. The next, this I think we talked a little bit about. Right, so these are some of the things that we talked about. We're looking at more expenses for employing people with autism and getting them jobs. The only thing I'm going to mention about this last report is Paul looked at people who are actually now using the developmental disability services in their states and how that's going, which is a very, very complicated question. The only thing I want to tell you about the developmental disability system is, and this is important, and it'll be important when you talk to Juan and Steve and Joseph. What is a developmental disability? Well, most of you probably think you know this, and you do. But there's some important catchwords in here for services in Illinois. A significant impairment that manifests before the age of 22. So it's very important to have documented disabilities in your IEPs, in your paperwork before the age of 22. Resulting in substantial limitation in 3 or more life areas. These include self-care, language, learning, self-direction, mobility, capacity for independence, and economic self-sufficiency. Why is this important? Because many people with autism don't have intellectual disabilities, but they are significantly functionally disabled. That is the kind of person that we're serving in our program. And the state of Illinois, in order to get any kind of funding without an intellectual impairment, which basically means you have an IQ below 70, it's just a rough cutoff that they use, it can be very hard to qualify for services. So you have to show impairment that looks like you would have what the state calls mental retardation or an intellectual impairment. All right, so it's important to think about that, and when you're looking at having your children evaluated and you're looking at getting into the service delivery programs, this is not a time to make your child shine. You have to think about what your child does, not what can they do, what do they do? And don't beef it up. Here's where you're going to need to really make them look like they're struggling if you're going to get any funding at all. We're going to zoom back in now a little bit just to our program and what we've done and tell you a little bit about that. And then I'm happy to answer any questions for you that I can. So we're back to 2012, and we know we have to kind of change the world, and we have about 18 months to do it. We knew that there was this tremendous need for more intensive psychiatric care directed towards this transition age student. And our vision in those days became clear. We wanted to start with housing. We knew we wanted to be in the city. We wanted to be on the near west side because we wanted to be near Rush. Rush was starting a new autism assessment research and treatment service program. I'm very proud to say that we helped get that off the ground as well. Dr. Krause and I basically put our head together one day after looking at what happened to John, and we just said, you know, what are we going to do here? Like, we got to do something. We can't let this go on. So Rush also was given a very generous gift by the Bowler family, a $5 million gift to start their program as well, and it's up and running now. We knew we wanted to be close. Psychiatric stability is the heart of our program. Without that, we don't have anything. So our model really emphasizes finely tuned medication management with relationship-based supports and evidence-based practices. Our process, I would say, came through, it was somewhat haphazard. I went and just started knocking on doors. I visited 1 million different providers in the developmental disability system. We went to California. We looked at a program called Sweetwater Spectrum. I went to Arizona. I met with the leaders of SARC, which is a big Southwest Autism research and service delivery program. These are the real giants out there. I did a lot of observing and talking and trying to discern what was important in some of these different models. We met with architects and some financial folks to see feasibility-wise, what could we get off the ground? You'll see in the country, there's a lot of people putting together large campus-like models. I think those are wonderful. I'm a big proponent of having all kinds of models, but we knew we couldn't raise $21 million in 18 months. We had to start somewhere, and we really wanted to start, we knew we had to have something for John by the time he graduated from the orthogenics school. So we really identified the things that were important to us in our model, and those things included, in a residence, we wanted a conduit. We didn't want to create a container or a place where people just stayed all day. And some of the group homes that I looked at really felt that way to me. They were extremely isolated on a freeway behind a billboard, and it was just horrifying to me to think that, our kids are going to live like that. It would be a terrible way to live. We wanted our residences to have community spaces so that they don't just serve as houses, but they serve as places for people in the community to come and meet and take part in activities. We also knew we wanted houses with independent bedrooms. Everyone needs their own bedroom. That was just an absolute deal breaker for us. So we located on the near west side in a neighborhood that gives us access to Rush University Medical Center and the University of Illinois in Chicago. We have now access to university students and interns who serve as our staff members. We knew we needed access to public transportation. You're really not independent if your mom is driving you to a movie on Friday night when you're 26 years old. So our kids take the buses, they take the Blue Line, and they're really quite good at this, and it's opened up a whole world for them. We wanted them to be near free, fun stuff in Chicago. Like, there's a ton of stuff to do. We also knew we wanted to be near schools and programs and classes, and of course, most importantly, jobs. The city is going to give us the biggest draw of employment opportunities, and I think we've been right. So when we started our residence, we opened our doors in 2014, but we got a hold of 1212 Flournoy, which we call Project 1212, in 2013. And it's a beautiful 150-year-old brownstone on the near west side. It has 4 to 5 bedrooms, large space on the first floor that isn't pictured here, and a lot of capacity for people to have privacy, but also to be together in community under one roof. I can tell you that none of this was easy. Every single day there were 1,000 obstacles, from the color of the paint on the wall, to the furniture, to the permits, to the construction. We made a lot of changes to this house so that it would function the way that we wanted. And it was difficult. I'm not gonna lie, it was expensive, and it was very, very difficult, and it was very time consuming. We really expected an excellent finished product. So we had a lot of pressure on ourselves there. When you guys are thinking about housing and thinking about the future, think about housing and separate the bricks and mortar of your dreams from the operating model. When parents tend to think about housing, they get so overwhelmed so quickly. Who's going to run this, and how are we going to staff it, and where is it going to be, and what kind of a house or apartment? Try to keep those things separate. You can operate a program that's a studio apartment all by itself. You can operate the Taj Mahal. So the bricks and mortar and the operating model are 2 separate decision types of processes. Don't try to keep them all together. And the ownership models of the bricks and mortar is as diverse and interesting and complicated as you want to make it. You can have one person own a house. You can have a nonprofit own a house, you can have a business own a house, you can have 4 or 5 people own a house. There's a lot of different ways to do this. So our house, Project 1212, has the capacity to house 4 young men, but it serves as a hub for at least 10 people in our community. We have a couple of programs operating now. We have another townhouse that's a couple blocks away where 3 young people live. We have a couple folks in our neighborhood who come to us for program support. They're in their own apartments. So at the heart of our staffing model is a SILA company, and I'll tell you just a little bit about that. When we started the program in 2014, John was funded through the Home and Community-Based Waiver to live in a group home. He moved from the orthogenic school into Project 1212 on June 6th. His funding kicked in that day. Our provider was Active Visions, which is a wonderful, wonderful adult developmental disability provider. Cheryl Prinz is the CEO, she's my good friend, and she agreed to run this house for us. Well, after about 3 months of having a nonprofit with its own expectations and goals and sort of programming alongside a SILA provider in one roof, Cheryl sat me down and she said, guess what? I'm not doing this. And I said, oh. She said, you're doing it. And I said, well, how am I gonna do this? And she said, you're gonna get your own license. So, like every little girl's dream is to operate a group home. Great, this is like the one thing I never wanted to do, be the one that gets the call at 2 in the morning. I always said in every talk I've given, I don't wanna be the one that gets the call at 2 in the morning. Well, guess what? I have like the biggest data plan, you know, on the earth. So, long story short, I did go ahead and I went through the licensing process, and in 2016 I was awarded a license to operate a group home. This is an arduous, unbelievable process, and parents just have no idea the rules and regulations that drive SILA providers or group home providers. There are so many ridiculous rules and regulations that we have to follow. And parents are so angry with us, but we have to implement these things, like the way medications are given and tracked and stored, the way the staff is trained. We are required to train our staff for 180 hours before they're allowed to be in the healthcare worker registry. So I was saying to Linda, when we have parents come in on a Saturday and they give a young staff member a piece of their mind and that staff person quits, that's a big loss of financial investment for us and time. There's just, I could go on and on and on, but I could teach you to work in our house in 5 minutes, but the state makes me train you for 120 hours. I think I said 180, it's 120. It's 80 hours of on-the-job training, 40 hours of online training. If you can operate a cell phone, you can work in our house. That's how it works. So if you have more questions about that, we can look at that later. For our kids, every day is different, and we're very, very proud of that. A typical day for anybody includes a job, paid employment, using transportation, going to a concert, going to a museum, volunteering, going to a club or a restaurant, going to bars. We have 2 kids that hit the bars on Taylor Street. They love to go to conventions. I know, we're right there with them, believe me. It's absolutely the truth. We have a lot of behavioral therapists working in our program. The state allows us 104 hours per client, and we use every hour that we can get. So none of our kids have the same day, and we love that. That kind of describes our residential program, and it is a combination of kids who have group home funding and who pay privately. And some have 24-hour supports, and some have a couple hours of support. But at the heart of that program is a 24/7 staff. And you have to have that for a residential program. Because I guarantee you there is a time, if you can, I tell parents, if you can schedule your child's crisis, I'm good with that because I can staff that. But if we can't schedule it, then we have to have staff 24 hours a day. Because you just never know when something's going to happen. So that's our residential program. Our nonprofit also operates a very growing and large social network program. We call it Network 1212. We just like 1212. We like the address and kind of took over that as a brand. Network 1212 serves over, think we have over 125 activities a year. We've touched, I think, over 900 people. Every month, we meet at Pompey Bakery on Taylor Street. This Sunday, I'll run that meetup. We have about 30 young people that show up for pizza, board games, and friendly conversation. It is not a skills group. We don't structure it. We help a little bit, but we tell folks, if you need help, you need to bring your own support person. I had a mom there last month with a new young man, just a lovely family. And again, I tell stories about parents because I can tell the exact same stories about myself. So don't assume that I'm picking on anybody. But mom was there, her son had sat down, he was on his phone. She came over and she took his phone away. I took the phone away from her and I said, now you have to go sit in the other room. You can't be here because this is for young people and we're not here to tell them what to do. They're gonna figure this out and they do, believe it or not, they do. Month after month after month, they really become familiar and comfortable. Some other things that we do though, we have at least 4 events a year, like a Super Bowl party, Memorial Day party, Halloween party coming up. Those are pretty big outings. Other things that we do, every Wednesday night, my husband Mike leads the Urban Hike with Mike. It used to be the Tuesday Trek with Tracy, but we had to change it to Wednesday, so we had to come up with something else. And he has a group of about 10 kids that go tromping around all 77 Chicago neighborhoods. The rule is that you have to be able to eat for under $10. And they walk for 3 to 5 miles. They take public transportation, they go check out a new neighborhood, they have dinner together. Mike tells me that everyone in the group just talks to him, and they don't talk to each other. And so now we have a little more staff on those outings, but that kind of is what happens, which is hysterical, because it's true. They're all to him, and he has terrible hearing, by the way. So it's not a good combination. Yes, it could be a good thing. Although he would not acknowledge that himself, of course. What are some other things that we do? We just finished a series of movies at Millennium Park at the J. Pritzker Pavilion. We go to those every week. I mean, we just have so many things going on. We take advantage of UIC. We go to plays and concerts, basketball games, and we open these events up to the public. So they're on our calendar, and if you want to join us, you can. There's a small donation requested or the cost of a ticket if you're coming to something. We also use Project 1212 now to work with our Chicago Public School partners. So in January, when our farm program is over, and we'll talk about that in a minute, we host independent living and learning classes at Project 1212. We take a group of 10 to 12 CPS students. They come for cooking, pet care, and laundry instruction or community-based outings. We break them into groups. We end that program with a big meal, and it's just a wonderful program of welcome and hospitality. So a lot of our philanthropy goes into that program. I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about some of our vocational programs. As I mentioned earlier, agriculture is near and dear to my heart, even though I was a city girl. When I raised my family in Glenview, I was fortunate to live near Wagner Farm. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Wagner Farm, but I was basically the livestock manager there and a 4-H later there for 10 years. We grew that program from 3 kids to 60 kids. We took all kinds of dairy cattle, pigs, and lambs to the Lake County Fair every year, and I saw for myself what agriculture did for kids and how it created a community and how many jobs there are on a farm. And just the kind of skills that it taught to all children, not just those with special needs. It was just an amazing program. And I'm happy to say that really was a home for John. Those were the happiest days of his life. He could show these 2,000-pound cows and not get run over. And he did very well, and he truly had a couple of friends in that program. They're sort of his friends today. But those were his happiest memories. So I love agriculture. When we started our programming, we knew that we wanted to be somehow in the foodie business. I wasn't allowed to bring dairy cattle into the city, unfortunately. Thought that was too big of a hurdle. So we went with plant-based systems. The local food business now is a $20 billion a year business. We knew it was a good thing to be in, and we would be able to serve a lot of people at a farm type of a site. So our signature vocational program is Growing Solutions Farm. It's a 1.5 acre piece of land in the Illinois Medical District. The Illinois Medical District houses Rush University Medical Center, UIC, the Jesse Brown VA, and the Veterans Hospital, Cook County Hospital. So 4 hospitals. No urban planner would ever put these hospitals together again like this, but they currently exist that way. And this land was donated to us for a few more years anyway. We have developed it into a place with over 120 raised beds, a greenhouse, outdoor sheds and structures, as well as an outdoor classroom. And every year we serve 30 to 35 kids from Easter Seals, our residential program, and the Chicago Public Schools. We look at this as a vocational training site. For most of these young adults, they're young people of color. They're extremely low income. They have had none of the advantages that our students have had in these good school districts. And we are very, very close to the Chicago Public School teachers, so do not take that as a slant against them. There are literally 20,000 students with transition plans at CPS. I mean, there are 0 outcomes right now. It's just it's an abomination. So we're trying our best to make a little bit of difference there. These students are so amazing. They're so talented. They are so employable. And we are now going to be a community rehab partner with the Department of Rehab Services to help these kids go from our farm, which is a vocational training site, and now get some entry-level jobs while they're in school. So we were just awarded that contract, which is like a ton of work. So it's kind of like a good thing, bad thing. It's like, oh, now we've got this. So look, we just created a lot more work for ourselves, but we're actually excited about it. Behind the scenes, there are 2 students in speech pathology from Rush who run the vocational programming that goes behind this, teaching soft skills, workplace behaviors, communication skills for the workplace. We have occupational therapy graduate students as well who do an intensive practicum here. We have education students from DePaul who come here in the summer with us. So it's a wonderful program. There's all kinds of people, and it's a true community. And using community to build employment skills is an evidence-based practice. So we think it's very important, it's very visible, and it's a great front door. We love our farm. We're growing about 10,000 pounds of produce a year. We're donating about 3,000 pounds, and our sales this year are now probably going to support our lead grower's salary. So Growing Solutions Farm is near and dear to our heart. Like I said, there's no animals there, but I'm okay with that. I don't know anything about those plants, and I mean that. I know nothing. But our lead grower knows everything, so that's a good thing. Our other programming involves, here's my pet care in here. We did start our own little dog walking and washing business. My son John came up with the name Wash Dog, and this has turned into a pretty successful little business. We have, again, not because people with autism are so good with animals. That's not true, actually. They're not great. They really have to be taught because dogs and cats are unpredictable. And we just know that there's an awful lot of dogs in the Taylor Street neighborhood. So we thought this would be a really good opportunity. And in fact it is. We're pretty busy. We can teach, I tell people I can teach 1 kid to walk a dog. I can't necessarily teach all children with autism to walk dogs. And there are some dogs that we just won't walk and work with. But this is one of our little micro businesses. We've started a program called Laundry Land, tongue-in-cheek. It's a visually based laundry system that was developed by Extraordinary Ventures in North Carolina. It's an amazing system. The young man pictured here, I wish we had a better picture of him. He's just an outstanding young man. He's completely nonverbal. He is so brilliant. He has the most incredible survival skills. He lives in a housing project in the West Side, and I mean, the kid is unbelievable, but he has 0 ability to communicate or signal, but he just does. You put him in a structured work situation, he takes off. He's basically able to run the whole laundry system, weighing, measuring, sorting. At the end, we wrap the clothes in saran wrap. It's really nice. We just need a few more customers, but Uzziah Jones is, he's our star. So This is something we're working with the University of Chicago to see if we can get a contract with them to help with some of their laundry. When we first met with them, their diversity procurement department said, "Oh, great, do you guys want to do the hospital?" And we're like, "Not yet. Like, let's start with like the track team, you know." We're not quite ready for like all those sheets and things, but we're still a little bit of a mom and pop organization. But anyway, so that is our, those are our businesses. So in conclusion, as we wrap up and think about all of this, where are we? Well, Paul Shattuck, this is a quote from one of his reports. I think in terms of the state of the art with autism, he describes this as like driving a car in the fog without a dashboard. You know, we know we're moving forward, we know we're making progress, we know we're going somewhere, we don't necessarily know if we're going in the right direction, we don't know if the gas we're using is the right gas or if we're getting the biggest bang for our buck. But definitely we know we're moving forward. But this is the state of the art. Nobody really knows. Nobody can say, oh, if you take a child or a young adult with these characteristics, put them in this kind of a program, it'll cost this much, you'll have this outcome. We don't have those metrics. We hope to have them, and I do believe one day we'll get closer to having them. But we are taking a stab at it, and I do want to encourage you that I do think there is more attention being paid to this, and I think more people are cognizant of not only people with autism, but people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, especially in the workplace. So that's kind of where we are. People ask me, you know, how'd you do this? And I just say, well, the only reason we're here today, and I swear to God it's the truth, it's because we didn't quit. There were 100,000 days when we could have quit, and we just didn't quit. We just didn't take no for an answer. We got no for an answer. I constantly get no for an answer. We just think of a way to get around it. Always, you can get around it. We put a lot of our own time and money into this as well. There's no way you can do it if you don't have some money and some time. But each parent in any kind of a program can contribute something. You can contribute your expertise, you can contribute your professional skills, you can introduce a nonprofit director to your friends. They need help with fundraising. You know, the nonprofit myth of the overhead, starving the overhead out of a business. I mean, you need good people running nonprofit organizations just like you need good people running any business. Nonprofit organizations are businesses. So I'm the executive director of Urban Autism Solutions. I take a tiny salary. Our number 2 in command is a very highly compensated, extremely talented businesswoman. She's worth every penny, and she will accelerate our programming into the next space where it needs to go. So everybody can contribute something. I think in terms of principles you should be aware of when you're designing programs and thinking about housing, just think safety and security is number 1 for your staff, for your clients, for your residents. Everyone has to be safe. That might mean a fence for some people. Other people, it might just mean that I can track them on their iPhone. Here's my phone again. I know where everybody is. You know, there's a lot of ways to think about safety and security. You know, technology is our friend. It can really help us in this business. If you're trying to start something yourself, just know you're not going to solve every problem. People say to me all the time, well, what are you going to do when John's 40? You know, I have no idea. Okay, I don't know. But I don't care. Like, this is as far as I got, you know, and really, you can't solve every problem. You're not going to make everybody happy. You also cannot be in the formulation stage forever. At some point, we had worked with, I'll tell you, we worked with an architect at first who was thinking about designing our logo. And after the 3rd meeting, when he was looking at shades of like brown, Mike and I looked at each other and were like, you know what, we gotta get out of here. I mean, like, are you kidding me? Like the shade of your logo, it's like we've got bigger fish to fry. So you've got to be able to make some decisions. You're gonna make mistakes, and just give yourself permission to make mistakes. We have made a ton of mistakes. I've spent money, I've wasted money, I have made mistakes. But in the end, I'm really proud of where we are. So you're gonna make mistakes, it happens. I think as an ending thought, I would tell you that these are my boys today. This was at Joe's wedding. John was his best man. John gave a great speech at the wedding. He told everybody how he and Joe were, the only two people in Glenview that grew up like without cable TV and sugar cereal till they were like 8. I don't know why I insisted on that either. I guess it was like a control thing. But anyway, their relationship is very solid. I'm very, very lucky and blessed that I have an intact family. I know how hard it is to get through these struggles. There are a lot of families that don't make it, and believe me, I understand why. I will also tell you, it looks like all we do is walk around in formal wear. These are just the most recent pictures. But I mean, honestly, Peter Early is an award-winning journalist. He wrote the book Crazy. He was a Washington Post journalist, and his books have been made on the New York Times bestseller for years. And he had a similar experience with his son in the mental health system. And he says it best. He says, in the end, it really is the individualized attention and the one-on-one supports that make all the difference. So the people working with your children, that's really what's important at the end of the day. Having the highest quality people that you can, working with your family members. This is what really makes the difference. And I'm happy to tell you really that as a young man now, John is stable, he's employed, I think he's actually very happy, he's not lonely, he easily regulates his emotions, he can pull himself away if he's feeling angry or upset. He never really has any, more difficult explosions. Those things seem to be a thing of the past. And Mike and I often invite him out, and we'll ask to see him on a Sunday, see if he wants to go to dinner with us or do something. And a lot of times he'll tell us, I think I'll just stay home. And that is how I know that we've been successful. So thank you very much for your attention. It's a pleasure. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask? I want to take it. Yes?
You talked about post-secondary ed, and you were going to give your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, these programs, I think as parents, leaving high school is terrifying, and it's very tempting to jump into the next thing. Make your decisions based on where you see your child ending up. So some of these post-secondary programs are really very expensive, and you have a right to know what kind of outcomes you should expect. If you're signing on the dotted line, college is not for everybody, nor is it necessary. For some of our kids, vocational programming or just meaningful programming during the day is much, much more important. So what we tell people is come and join us and start living your life now. Don't practice living your life. Don't go somewhere where you're going to have an internship in a practice apartment and then come back home and have to start all over. Try and build those skills in the community where you see yourself staying and living. That's just my advice. I think that you don't want to have to constantly hit restart. You can start learning these skills right now. So, and we'd love to have any of you come and visit us as well. Yes, ma'am.
A couple of questions, I think. One is, if you don't mind, a personal question.
Sure.
Is your son still on medication, or
Oh,
has
yes.
he been able to?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
3 days off. So John takes Clozaril, which is, for those of you who are not familiar, it's the end of the road medication for people with significant psychosis. And it's a very dangerous medication. You have to have your blood drawn every month and causes significant side effects. But when it works, it is amazing. And it was literally the thing that turned his life around. And he knows, like, he would never be even a stone's throw away from his medication. So he does take Clozaril, he takes lithium, he takes, that's it. Those are the biggies.
One of our struggles with our son is that he is really very high functioning autistic, and to the point where he doesn't even think he has social cue issues and all that kind of stuff. And so, but he's very withdrawn, and he stays at home 100% of the time. Over the summer, we came up with some kind of an agreement where we drew it up together in terms of what his long-term goals are, short-term goals are, long-term goals for him, short-term goals for each other. And we eventually got happening to the point where he would at least reach out and accept a friend's request to come over and do something together. But he's in his 5th year of high school this year. One of the reasons is even though he got the credits to graduate last year, is because of these issues of not being able to be independent, not being able to advocate for himself. He still has issues with feeling sick. I can't go to school today. I can't go to school today. Well, it's starting again this year. I mean, we barely started the school year. So we're kind of concerned about, the school tries the best that they can, but they only know so much, and they only can do so much. And they're doing everything they can, but for his social emotional well-being, I feel like it's not enough. We don't know what else to do. So kind of this is one of the reasons why we're here. Your program sounds interesting, but so you're saying there's something we can do to get him into social situations with your program, or?
There are, but then he has to get in the car and come with you, and we know how hard that can be.
He might, I mean,
Yeah, and this is where a lot of, and to your point, I think a lot of these kids with less of those kinds of cognitive impairments, more executive dysfunction and social communication issues. I know a slew of them, and none of them think they have any problems.
Exactly.
And
that's the hardest part of dealing with.
they don't want to be part of any group because all those kids have problems, and I don't have any of these problems. And those are interesting conversations. Like, you can sort of change that inner dialogue over time. I mean, just at sort of a skills level, there's a program we teach called Peers. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Peers. It's a evidence-based social skills program developed at UCLA, but it's for kids who want to make and keep friends. And you have to want to learn the skills. And again, a lot of our kids are like, "No, I've got this," and we're like, "No, you don't."
Well, we're starting to build. I think he's starting to accept the label of autism, and we're just like, "That's not me."
Yeah.
But I think over time he has recognized. I could say, "Well, so good. This happened because this happened." See, that's kind of what we're talking about. So over time, it's not that he completely says, "I'm not that way anymore." That was his initial response to being diagnosed. And he used to think it was just IBS that caused all his problems in school, irritable bowel syndrome. And now he's realizing, because we've talked about it for so long now, that the autism and the anxiety of autism can be an underlying factor as well, maybe even more significant than just a medical kind of thing. So little by little, I think he's coming around to it, but again, we just feel like we don't know what else to do.
It's hard, and you're doing a lot as parents. It's sometimes easier if you can have a professional, if you have a really counselor that you like or that he likes, to kind of work some of that out with. I think I would.
That's one of the problems in the medical field. They give us therapists for his anxiety.
Yeah.
We have a psychiatrist for his medication. But are they really addressing the underlying issues of autism? No.
No.
They don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So
Well, and if you were close to the city, or Alexi Brothers, I know has a pretty good program, but I mean, there's some great therapists at Rush. I don't know where you live. I'm assuming you're out here. Yeah. Let me think a little bit though, because I could at least connect you with the Autism Resource Center at Rush, and they might have somebody in your area that would help. Because you will see changes over time. That's something we've seen. Tiny W's, tiny little wins, but once you get into the adult world, it is a slower process. Their trajectory is up, but it looks like a lot of squiggly lines go in every direction before you get up again. So, but that kind of like school refusal, anxiety, symptoms in
Our son wasn't even diagnosed until his senior year.
Yeah.
So, we're really late into the game of even knowing what these things were.
Yeah, but it's good that you've at least got them get everything you can on paper now. And stay in your transition programs as long as you can. I tell people that too. Yes, ma'am.
I have 2 questions, and if you answered one of these already, I'm sorry. How many people live in the house at 1212?
12 houses, 4 people. 4 people live there, but about 10 people in the community right now use it. So they live elsewhere, but they come over. They're there a lot.
And then my second question is kind of like 2 parts. What is the application process for living there, and how long is your waiting list?
Good question. We start with families by asking them to fill out a simple application that's on our website, or you can email us at our info account and we'll send you an application. Then we'd like to meet with you and hear a little bit more about what you're looking for and what kind of needs that your family member might have. And that's when we start looking at funding and what might be available. So we always tell people that we have openings because we're looking to grow and we might open the next program or the next house. We really are more interested in just finding the right mix of people. I told Linda too, we're finding that, it's not so much the young people, and I mean this kindly. The difficulties that we've had from an operations standpoint are with parents. And nationally, no offense, I'm a parent, okay, I'm a parent, sometimes I get frustrated with my own program. Like when I look at John, I'm like, why is he wearing that shirt? And then I'm like, look away. Just, don't go there. Just, he's an adult. Like, you don't know what Joe's wearing today either. It's probably not a tuxedo. But we've had a couple parents that just have made such demands that have been so impossible for us to work together. What started as a partnership clearly became a business, and we weren't partners. And we were running the business, and they became unhappy customers. So there's lots of models for putting together these kinds of houses and things, but I found that it just takes a long time to get parents to know what to do. So I would say the house 1212 is full, but you never know. I mean, things change. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, Julie, you talked about people being able to come in into open community space in the houses. I missed what that is, how
Sure.
that works.
So what we do, we start with our meetup at Pompeii Bakery on Sunday, which is once a month, and we ask people to come to that event so we can get to know them in a public space. And then if they seem like a good fit, they're safe, again, we become a little more discerning as well. I had somebody does anybody use the Meetup? Do you all know what Meetup is like that? So it's a social network site where you can put together a program. So I had a young man contact me just yesterday, and he started his message with, "You idiot." And I was like, you're blocked. You're not we're not off to a very good start. So we really like to make sure that everyone is at least safe and stable. And then if we meet, then we extend an invitation to other types of programming. So before we invite people back to 1212, we like to meet them in public and know a little bit about them. And usually it's up to our guys to decide. They're like, hey, I met somebody, I'd like to invite them to movie night this Friday. Like, great. Send them and get the email. We have everybody sign in. So you can contact us through our info account again, or come to our Sunday. We have meet up this Sunday. That's one way. Or come and just meet us. Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to go back a little bit about therapists. The one-on-one people that work with your child are really critical. And our son is 19, and kids never connect with any therapist. I mean, I think about the thousands of dollars that we spend to bounce around different therapists, and it's like we never found anybody that he was willing to open up to and talk about his anxiety or address these social issues. Part of it's like that lady was saying, you wanted any other problem. Like those kids have problems, I have problems. So I guess my question is there a service that like rates therapists? I mean, part of the problem is, you can go out and get ratings for all kinds of things, but it's not even ratings of doctors and therapists, right? And found them yet.
I think maybe to think about a different type of a support system, so maybe more of a mentor, like a peer mentor or another student that might, not necessarily in the high school, but at the college level. One thing I didn't mention is that a lot of the folks that we hire in our program have autism. So we have 3 young staff members that are fully trained direct support providers. And they have autism themselves, and they teach me things all the time. Like that peer mentoring model is a really good one, and it is an evidence-based practice. So if there's maybe, not a therapist, but just someone to be with. And even if it isn't therapy, maybe it's just go for a fill in the blank, whatever your son likes to do. I would start there. Someone we can build rapport with and just trust. It sounds like just having some kind of a relationship. I know how hard that is though, because the isolation makes the anxiety and the mental health worse. But how do you crack into it when you've got someone who just won't accept anything? So, and, you know, John is still like, I'm good, you know, I don't need to call anybody ever. And he can kind of get away with it now because he kind of doesn't need to. But it's not like we've changed that about John. That's still who he is. That was in his IEP for 21 years. John will initiate a social, oh, well, no, he didn't. So I would say you may not change it, but you may find, does that make sense or is that helpful? Just think about it.
It's a really good idea.
I just think of how we could do it. Yeah.
I think you see more and more now on like websites like Sitter City and Care.com,
Mhm.
where it's parents or sometimes individuals themselves like reaching out and saying, I'm looking for someone to attend like this event that's coming up with my son.
Yeah.
Or to go on to this class that he's interested in taking in the Park District and looking for someone to enroll in the class with him. You know, it occurs at this time, or, you know,
Yeah.
it's clear that it's not babysitting.
Right.
But that, you know, the needs are described. And the nice part about that is that if you meet someone and, you know, you work with them and you're like, it's not a good fit, then that's fine.
Yeah.
Or if you hire them and it, for, you know, goes for 3 weeks and you feel uncomfortable, then, you know, you've lost $60 or $100 or whatever it is that you're paying. Because there's a lot of students in college, enrolled in community colleges or at universities, special ed degrees, education degrees, psychology, that are interested in getting the experience and that, you know, that they don't cost.
Yes,
as
that's a
much.
great
Good thing.
suggestion. What does your son like to do? Is there one thing that, yeah, Like, yeah.
I mean, his goal in life is to be a YouTuber, right?
Yeah.
Just one person makes it.
So, maybe we can start by having somebody come over and just do that with him. And a college student is perfect because they're all doing the same thing anyway. You know, and all of our kids are so addicted to these screens, like it's a huge problem for us. We can't get anyone to go to sleep at night. It's a big problem. But that's a great suggestion, just like a local school or Care.com. And it's like $20 instead of $195.
Yeah, we used Care.com a couple of years ago to try to find like someone's kind of.
It's hit or miss.
Yeah, but yeah.
It's hit or
Yeah,
miss.
it didn't work out well, but